Speed. Marker. And action.
This podcast is being recorded at the Motion Picture Institute, the oldest film school in Michigan, training the next generation of filmmakers today. Check out the website motionpicture.edu and schedule a tour now. All right, guys, and welcome back to the show. Today I have an exciting guest, Zeke Anders. He's a director photographer currently based in Detroit, Michigan. His work has won top accolades and been featured in media outlets worldwide. He spent his 20s sharpening his filmmaking skills in Los Angeles by directing commercials, serving as his entry point into the creative industry. He'd eventually discover the art of travel X street photography, which quickly led to a passion for photojournalism. As a director and photographer, he has won top honors worldwide, including 2 International Clio Awards, bronze at the New York Film Festival, 8 National Telly Awards, and was included in Shoot's 19th annual New Directors Showcase. His work has also been featured in publications around the world, including Daily Voice Seoul, NBC, NPR, Esquire, Hypebeast, Huffington Post, CBS, and Mzansi Live in South Africa, to name a few. Welcome to the show, and without further ado, let's talk motion picture. Zeke, I appreciate you being here, sir.
It's great being here.
So I would like to know from the get, you getting into filmmaking and what convinced you to move to LA in order to pursue that?
I think nothing had to really convince me. I think at the time, that's just where I needed to be. And I started out here in Detroit working at an ad agency, which was invaluable. It gave me my first real step into the production world and knowing how the workflow and just, how all the different components come together. And that really, I think, gave me a good head start or a jumping off point for then when I moved to LA. I already sort of, had a little bit of an education.
Yeah, you were telling me that on the phone, how it started in high school, I believe.
Yeah. So I went to a high school that at the time had a really good video program. And even before high school, like in junior high, I just really started getting interested in filmmaking. And by the time I came to high school, I just dove headfirst into this video program. And that really, I was hooked.
And then, so my question is, what was the first film job you ever got, and what was it?
Well, in high school, I was doing some paid gigs.
Oh, congrats.
I don't, I'm not going to consider those as professional work, but I would say, right outside of high school, I graduated, and then Detroit's PBS actually hired me to be a freelance segment producer for one of their shows. And that was, I think, my first real opportunity.
And what was that job all about?
It was a show called Backstage Pass, and it was like a Detroit entertainment arts culture show. And so there would be different segments. Some, one segment would be about, local artists and musicians, and another segment would be actual traditional artists, whether they're painters or sculptors or whatever. And my responsibility was to helm the arts segment. So I would go out and interview artists at their studios, or go to Cranbrook and interview a curator that's putting up a new show. It was really interesting.
Okay. And then, so how much production experience did you have in Detroit before you moved to Los Angeles?
I had 6 years at the ad agency, which 6 years in advertising is 20 years in real life production, because everything just moves so fast. And so I had that, and then along with a couple years of working at Detroit's PBS. So, I was pretty sharp at that point and I felt ready, this was the time to do it.
So that's a concept that I definitely want to deep dive in, is when you feel ready. I've spoken to some people who reach that point where their career has become exponential and they're getting calls from out of town. That's usually the indicator for them to start leaving. They don't just want to jump ship before they have those calls come. So did you have calls coming in from out of town?
I didn't.
So you just went straight for it.
I did.
I respect that. That's
I did.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's a leap of faith, and you really have to play it smart, right? Like the thing that I had, again, just not only the experience, but I also had relationships with production companies out there because of my work in advertising. So it's not like I just went out there blindfolded, but I didn't have anything like lined up per se. So
when you moved out there, what was your like specific goal, like intention wise, to find work? Like what area of production?
I knew that I was going to have to start at the bottom. And again, tracking my path at that point, I was an agency producer. So I am, helming and sort of leading the production charge of the projects that I'm working on at this agency, and going out to LA or going to New York or wherever the shoots are. We're the people that are sitting in the video village, getting, PAs are getting us coffees and, everything like that. And then when I went out to LA, everything was flipped. I was the PA now, getting the agency or the clients the coffee runs and doing that. And I knew I had to do that. And I wanted to do that because I really needed to learn from the ground up. And so my expectations going out to LA was just get in any way I can from the ground up and just work my way up. And that allows anybody who's done that, it allows really a 360 view of how productions work, like on the ground. It's not a, there's one thing to like read books and watch behind the scenes on how things are done, but it's a whole other game when you are there doing it. And that is like invaluable.
That was my next question. What was the most valuable experience you had when you were out in LA that's informed you as a filmmaker till today?
I mean, it's going to sound cliche. Every job, every project, every experience is different. And you have to be open to it. But if you are, you learn on every single job. As a PA, I worked on a big, it was for Michael Jordan, a huge shoot. And I mean, that was amazing. Like that was, the DP was Janusz Kaminski, and I was actually working in the camera department on that job. So I literally was like sucking in and breathing in. And
I'm not familiar with the DP.
Oh, Janusz has shot a lot of Spielberg's films. Like he shot Schindler's List and Minority Report.
I should know this guy.
Yeah, Academy Award-winning DP.
That must have been exhilarating.
It was amazing. It was amazing. So I mean, when you get opportunities like that to like work with those types of people and that type of talent, I mean, you want to take advantage of that.
I mean, so why? Because you're also you do a lot of photography.
Yeah.
And did that start, from what I understand, when you were in LA?
It did. It started after. I mean, I was well into like filmmaking, and then I somehow got interested in photography, which is, I would say, if I were to do it over again, photography would probably be the first entry point. And then you sort of get into more like cinematography and directing and all that. Because photography is such a wonderful medium because it's just you. Making a film, you can't really make a film by yourself. It requires a team of people. And photography doesn't. It's just you. You can go out, you can experiment. You're working with cameras and lenses, and that's really where you can educate yourself on lensing and depth of field and aperture. And, whether you're shooting digital or film, you can learn about, the film speeds and ISOs and all that. And so that's a great tool to then get you to the next level, which would be like cinematography.
Yeah. So then when you were in LA and you were doing this photography, you developed this passion for it. You also got into directing commercials, but you went out to LA, it sounds from what you said earlier, as a producer, or like working your way into a producing position. So how did it go from like a PA on LA shoots to a director? How did that come about?
Yeah. I didn't go out to LA to be a producer. That was just my background.
Gotcha.
And there was a little bit of like a hurdle to get over that, because again, you know, coming from an agency and being an agency producer and then going out to LA, meeting with production companies that I had relationships with as a agency producer, trying to convince them that, hey, I want to be a director. They couldn't understand that, because they only knew me as a producer. And so there's a little bit of that sort of compartmentalization where when people see you as one thing, it's very hard to then like flip the script and go a different direction. So I was battling that a little bit. And you just have to like stick to it and just go all in. And eventually I think, at least with my experience, it worked. Like I shed that old image of I'm not a producer anymore. I'm now a director and a filmmaker.
So that's the exact moment I want to try to understand. The moment that you flip the script. I guess it'll probably be your first directing credit out there.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen? How did you get that first gig? Who gave it to you? Did you just do it yourself? You're like, damn it, I'll shoot a Coke commercial on my own.
Well, yes, actually, you know, getting into commercial directing, there's no one way to do it, right? Like there's no like rule book on how to do it, but at least for me, I did do spec spots, like basically fake spots.
Can you break that down for people who don't know what that is?
So a spec spot is essentially a speculation spot. Is you literally go out and you produce and direct and execute a fake commercial. Can be whatever you want it to be, but you should choose a brand or a client that works for your concept and works for your budget. And you go out and you just produce this fake commercial. Now, it should be so good that nobody can tell that it's not a real commercial. Like people should look at it and maybe they don't remember it being seen on TV or streaming ads, but it's like, it's that good that it's like, oh yeah, this could have been. And so that's basically a spec spot. So, you know, usually when you're trying to do spec spots, you don't have any money because you're just using your own money to produce this thing. So, you know, when I say you got to be smart about things, you know, you don't want to do like, say, I'm making this up, but you don't want to do like some like Coca-Cola ad that, of course, in the real world, Coca-Cola is going to have millions of dollars behind their production. So, because then clearly you can't compete with that. You can't compete with that production value. So you want to be smart on picking a brand or you know, a client that with whatever idea you have that you can execute it so well that budget doesn't matter. It's really the idea.
I love this idea because I've heard people online, specifically these filmmaker influencers on like Instagram. They'll be like, you want to shoot like a spec commercial. It's the only way to do it. And then I'm like, yeah, but how do you compete, right, when you're going up against these conglomerates?
Yeah.
And I've never heard someone say exactly that. You want to try shoot a spec for a company that you could potentially be budgeted for.
Yeah.
You know, going up against Google, you are going to lose.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
I've never heard that before. I like that. And I mean, so how long did you do this in LA for? So once you've got this first gig, which, can I ask what like company it was for? Do you even remember?
It was for a financial company called Ally.
So you did this commercial for Ally. Did that open more doors for directing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, did it flood in right away, or was it like steady?
No. So, you know, I worked on these spec spots for probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And so, you know, at the end of that time, I had maybe 4, 5 like spec spots. And that's my reel. And so you start like pushing that out to production companies and even just like colleagues that you know. And, you know, that's essentially your resume. A producer back here in Detroit, who I had always stayed in touch with, and you know, being friends and colleagues, had a job or a project come up, and it was for Ally, and they were looking for basically like this down and dirty, almost docu-style type of production where, you know, there's some interviews, testimonials, working with real talent, like real people, not actors. And they just needed this production to like happen sort of down and dirty and scrappy, but still good. And so I think she probably saw some of my work that I had been doing in LA, and she hired me. And this was, at the time, this was for like maybe 3 sort of one-off spots. And I'll have to say, it worked out really well. I did the first couple, and the client, Ally, loved the way everything turned out, where this 3-spot campaign actually turned into like 5 years of work.
Whoa.
So that was, you know, that was like really fortunate. And of course, you know, I'm doing that, but I'm also still trying to like get other gigs and find other clients and hustle, you know, at the same time.
Yeah, I guess at that point, what is the driving passion? Is it just a passion to create, or were you trying to work towards something else?
I think there's multiple answers. One is to pay rent.
Amen.
Right? But that should never be, and it never has been, my first. Like, that's not what I lead to.
We appreciate the honesty, though.
But, you know, like, yeah, it's work. You got to, you know, pay the bills. And in this crazy business and you know, what we all want to be doing, you know, we'll do anything to try to maneuver that, right? Mm. But really, I mean, I've always had a passion for, I mean, again, since junior high and probably even a little earlier than that, to just get into this field and tell stories and create content and moving images, and yeah.
Okay. And then so what was the deciding factor to like move back to Michigan? Because I assume you had like a pretty establishing career at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was going pretty well, and I think my background in ad agencies, I think, helped, because when production got slow, I could sort of bounce back into the agency world and freelance for like, you know, like one-off projects that might take a couple months to produce and whatnot. And then after, you know, at the end of that, then I could like come back over into the production world and, you know, do other things. There was an agency in Chicago that actually a rep, director's rep, who I was friendly with. She knew I was in LA. She knew my background coming from the agency world. And there was an agency in Chicago that was looking to build their in-house production. And so this rep recommended me to this agency. And so I got on the phone with the agency. They flew me out to Chicago. I interviewed with them. And it sounded really interesting. It sounded like, at the time, a lot of agencies weren't thinking like that, bringing, in other words, like actually doing all the production in-house. And I think at that time, it was a very forward-thinking, sort of entrepreneurial, you know, mindset. And so that sort of excited me. So I was like, you know what? Like, what do I have to lose, right? Like, if it doesn't work out, I can always go back to LA, or I can do something else and whatnot. So I learned that I never really want to say no to an opportunity, because you just never know. And so I said yes. I moved to Chicago, did that for a couple of years, and it didn't, like, look, I'll be honest, like, it wasn't all that I thought it was cracked up to be. And that's part of the experience, right? Like, there's no shame in that. And so after those 2 years, since I was already here there in Chicago, I was so close to Detroit. I was like, okay, I'll leapfrog back to Detroit, which is where I'm here.
Yeah, you get too close to Lake Michigan and you're like,
Right.
it's not that far.
Right.
It's just a ferry away. No, I think there's something you said there that I think is, I don't think it is. It is very profound, and that is not saying no to an opportunity. Whether it ends up being good or bad, you're going to learn nonetheless.
Exactly.
And it's going to shape your journey.
Exactly.
It's a windy path. It's never straight.
Right.
And so, like, one thing I enjoy about your perspective on things is you seem like a very much a yes and kind of person. And that's the kind of spirit that I try to bring to my own shoots is, can we overcome obstacle, or are we going to be beaten by a problem?
Yeah.
You know, the latter seems kind of sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when it comes to commercial directing, I've never done a commercial. I'm getting my first commercial gig in the next 2 months or so.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's like a small business.
Yeah.
But I now, as comrade to comrade, I'm seeking guidance. When you're directing a commercial, when you're prepping for a commercial, like, where is your head? Where do you want to be? How do you prep? Kind of guide me here a little bit before I take on this venture.
Yeah. Commercial directing, and I would even venture to say that just like narrative directing also it's not what I think most people see it. It's not sitting in the director's chair, barking orders or giving direction to actors.
With the megaphone.
Right. And I mean, there was a little bit of that, but the lion's share, I think, of directing is there's a lot of writing involved. There's, of course, a lot of communication. And it's not just like creative communication with my actors or DP or whatever. It's a lot of logistical communication with your department heads. If you don't like answering questions,
It's over.
don't go into directing, because everything is answering questions. Like they're coming to you to find these answers. And you really have to have a 360 holistic view, grasp on whatever the thing is, whether it's the concept, the commercial, the film, whatever. So prepping a commercial is, and again, I mean, every job's a little different, but prepping a commercial, you are in the weeds of every detail of casting, wardrobe, locations, what key crew or like department heads you want to hire. A lot of people tend to work with the same team because there's a shorthand. It makes sense. And so it's all of that. And then on top of that, you're also collaborating with the ad agency and the creatives there and the clients even. Eventually the clients are, I mean, they're always there, like from beginning to end, but eventually you as the director begin to communicate and get FaceTime with the clients the closer the production gets, with the pre-pro meetings, and then of course when you're actually on set. And so there's a lot of communication. There's a lot of dynamic that you have to be able to juggle and prioritize, what needs to happen in what order.
And then I guess it's not necessarily a concern of mine. It's more, I'm a filmmaker.
Yeah.
I have ideas. I have a vision. I've written the script. I'm pretty confident in the vision. Of course, the client has notes and they like, hey, I want to change a couple of things. I'm like, absolutely. Let me know what you want to change. You are right.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, okay, I don't know what the changes are yet. So I guess my next question is, when you relinquish that control of the vision essentially to the person who's hiring you to execute it, because you kind of have no choice.
Yeah.
Like, what is, in your experience, what's the hardest part about that? And has there been any bright sides to it? Oh, that was amazing. The slight chuckle.
Well, again, commercial directing, you have to be able to look at it through a very specific sort of perspective where, how do I say this without getting in trouble here?
The brass tacks.
Look, you're not making art, right? Like it's a commercial. It's a commercial that can be very important because there's a lot of money that rides on anything, that rides on any of these types of commercials. There's a lot of money. And that's not something you want to take lightly, right? Because they are essentially entrusting you with hundreds of thousands of dollars for a 1-day, 2-day shoot. So when the client or the agency comes back with notes or like, let's change this or let's do this instead of that, you really need to be, open to those changes. Now, there's times where you as a director can, I wouldn't say like put your foot down, but maybe gently lay your foot down on certain things, and you can have a dialogue with the clients or with the agency and of course voice your opinion on maybe this isn't the best way to do it, or how about let's look at it from this way. And look, I mean, the great thing is everybody is there to make a great product in the end. It's just, maybe there's a better way or a more efficient way, or time is running out. Like that's also a real thing on set, especially on commercials, is like, hey, we have 3 more setups and we only have 90 minutes left. Can we get all of this done without getting into overtime, which of course means more money. So it all sort of rides on money, budget, and what the outcome of that is going to be. So as a director, of course, they're going to hire you. They hire me because of what I bring to the table, because of what my vision is, how I sold them this concept, on how to execute this concept. But, you have to be fluid. You just have to be fluid in these situations.
No, I think that does encourage me because the way you started by saying it's not art, that's how I've had to systematically in my mind kind of push it to the corner and say, whoa, what is the difference between what I do when I make a film as opposed to this? And it came down to writing the script, which I'm glad that you made an emphasis on that. Because for me, writing the script, I was like, oh yeah, I'm trying to like essentially sell why this brand or this company is dependable, why they should be chosen, right? Opposed to all the other competitors. And then above all else, why what they're doing, is important.
Yeah.
And for what the company is, obviously I can't go into too much information about it. I wish I could, but it's one of those situations I'm like, okay, now how do I market that with my skills in film, which, to run it short, I've learned by making short films and so forth, the idea of how to convince people that what they're seeing is a real thing.
Yeah.
How to convince them that this character is feeling a real emotion in a real situation, which now in this commercial situation, it's a person selling a product or a service. And now how do I make that believable? So it doesn't feel like, oh, this is hokey, right? So it's been a very interesting, cranium shift for me to try and figure that out. And that's why I was very excited to speak to you, Zeke, because you've been to the other side, right? You've seen the full extent of it.
Well, it sounds like you have a slightly more unique situation, which I think is great because you're writing the script. Traditionally, with commercial directors, we don't write the script. We don't come up with the idea. The idea originates with the creatives at the ad agency.
The marketing team, right?
Yeah. And of course, and rightfully so, they are protective of their baby, of their idea. And typically when they get the green light to go off and produce this commercial now, they're going to bid 3 directors. Which director is going to handle our idea the best, the most faithful? What can they bring to take our baby and elevate it even more? So there's a very nuanced interpretation when a director gets, on board, or even in the bidding process, when the director has to bid on this idea, to not change their idea too much, because then that's not being faithful to their idea, but to just add a little bit of like, well, let's try it this way, or, this is a great jumping off point, but what if we took that, but then raised it up a little bit? So you're enhancing their idea. So that's the sort of traditional sort of way of how commercial directors work and collaborate with the agency, is we take their idea and sort of, flesh it out a little more.
I'm not quite there yet, but I will be. No, and that makes a lot more sense. I appreciate you breaking that down. I do want to segue, because you're not just a phenomenal photographer, a phenomenal commercial director. You've also done documentary-esque work. I specifically want to talk about the one film that you shared with me. Do you classify it as a documentary film or just as a vlog?
Originally, when I did it, I called it a vlog. But I mean, it's like I guess a vlog.
A vlog. I'll say this for anyone. The link is public, correct?
Yes.
So I will add the link to our description. I'm speaking specifically about a video that you made called American Seoul. And Seoul spelled like the South Korean city.
Exactly.
Which is Seoul.
Correct.
And it's about your upbringing and how you were born in South Korea.
Yeah.
And you were left. The police found you, I believe.
That's the story.
And what I found most fascinating about this, if you're comfortable with me getting into it, is you're one of, I think you're the first person I've ever met who doesn't know their birthday.
Yeah.
And that's an insane thought to me.
Right.
And the police find you, you get put in like an orphanage for about 3 years.
Yeah.
There's this like insane story. Your only memory of South Korea is, I believe it was like a rat nibbling on your finger in the orphanage. And then you move to the United States because you get adopted by an American family. Yeah. And you know not their intentions for why they adopted you. Right. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail. It's kind of like the, the ad. But it's a very powerful, short, I would call it a documentary. Yeah. I just want to know how you classified it. But I want to know two things about it. And I will have the links for anyone who wants to see it. I do encourage you to watch it. It's about 15 minutes. Yeah. Very powerful, very emotional. What made you want to make that at the time you made it? And what kind of relief did you feel as a creative after making it?
Well, commercial work and freelance work, for anyone who does it, is going to know this already. It ebbs and flows, right? When it rains, it pours. You're super, super busy. And then there's always going to be a dry spell. And you're wondering when the next job's going to happen. And I mean, I love freelance work, but I hate those dry spells. And I get antsy. And so my thing is always be working, like always be creating. And so this was in LA. It was 2014. And I hit like a dry spell. I think it was like a slow summer. And I was like, I can't just sit around and do nothing. So I literally went into my garage, set up some lights, a camera, and started filming myself sharing my story. I don't even think I knew exactly what it was going to be. It was just something for me to like kind of waste time on. And I think looking at my background as a Korean American adoptee, I always found that it fascinated other people more than it did me. I mean, I grew up with me, so it's like my life. There's nothing new about it for me. But whenever people would find out that I was adopted, and they always were just so fascinating. So I knew, well, you know what? There's a story here. that I didn't do it for myself, but I did it because I knew there would be a little bit of an audience that might find this interesting. So that's really the sort of origin on why I did it. And I think when I finished it, once I finished filming myself, I knew I was going to put these up on YouTube, which they're not there anymore. I took it down, but I put them up as like little 2-minute like episodes. So they were actually broken out into like little, I think maybe 4 or 5 episodes. And I started just like hitting everybody up I knew, like on social media, like, hey, check this out, watch this thing I made, blah, blah, blah. And I released each new episode, like, you know, each week. So it was like maybe 5 weeks. And it just caught off because people wanted to see the next one, and then wanted to see the next one. And it eventually got onto NBC and NPR and a whole bunch of other places.
So the reason I bring this up is because, one, the fact that you shot this in your garage, impromptu, it's raw.
Yeah.
And when I was watching it, there was a part of me, because I know that you're a talented filmmaker. You've worked for big companies. You know your way around the equipment. I was like, something about this feels very different. When I was compared to your other work, I was like, this feels very much like, I knew there was nobody else on the other side of that camera, is what I'm getting at. And I'm like, okay, so this is interesting and it's fascinating. The reason I asked these 2 questions specifically is because in my perception of you, you're a filmmaker who's given your creativity, your effort, your energy to others for the majority of your career. Because like you said, you're not making art. Well, I mean, in that case, you made art. Like you made a very powerful piece because you made it for yourself. And I thought that was a very interesting conjunction.
Yeah.
I'm like, you have a filmmaker who's essentially, if you old knight terms, a knight of the realm, serving the realm, and then you do something for yourself.
Yeah.
And I could feel the stark difference, not in terms of quality, just in terms of the storytelling. I'm like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
You told something for yourself.
Yeah.
And I really, really enjoyed it, and I found it very moving. And then I was like, that takes a lot of maturity. And the way it was edited as well, it was like, I mean, you could have fooled me, man. It was like a very, very professional, production. And I was like, this is a beautiful journey that you've been on as a creative. And that was just, that's why I wanted to ask those questions, to see what caused it and then what you felt afterwards. Because if you do spend the majority of your professional career in any industry working mainly for others, there must be a certain relief when you do something for yourself.
100%. Yeah.
And like a weight off your shoulders, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned in high school in my video class, my teacher, and this is the thing that was probably the most profound thing that I've learned and I've tried to carry on through all of my career. He said, make your work personal. And I think that's so key to anything, whether you're a musician, a writer, a filmmaker, an actor, make the work personal. Now, I can sit here and we're talking about commercials. It's hard to make those personal, but I still think you can. I think you can still sort of insert your personality into these ads. But to your point, I've spent years of working for clients and big brands, and this was somewhat of a cathartic release that I could actually now take a step back, take a breath, and make something that truly came from me.
Oh, it was beautiful, sir. And I appreciate you sharing it with me.
Thank you.
And I look forward to putting the link in there so people can also see it. And in terms of time, I don't want to leave without giving you some space to talk about what you're working on next. If there's anything you want to promote, I like to give this last little bit to people. If there's anything you want to share.
I mean, I'm always working. I've got a couple projects, some new documentary projects. I'm not directing. I'm actually DPing for some other filmmakers that we'll be shooting like in late summer, probably fall. But I think for, I don't know, like just like as a last thought, as a filmmaker to other filmmakers out there, or not even filmmakers, just to other artists, you know, I'm gonna just kind of repeat myself a little bit, but like make the work the best it can be with whatever you have. Like there's no excuse to not go out and create something, especially with what we all have available at our fingertips. The iPhone. I mean, Steven Soderbergh, Academy Award-winning director, shot 2 films on an iPhone. Like, we can all be creative, and I think if we want to, you know, we should. We should definitely have our voice be heard, definitely have our vision be seen. There's nothing that really can stop you other than you yourself. And I think, I don't know. I think it's too important to not share your story. So just keep creating.
I like that. And Zeke, I appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thank you for your time, sir. It has been an honor. And I look forward to when you come back to the show eventually. Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So that was Let's Talk Motion Picture. Thank you, Zeke. This podcast is brought to you by Motion Picture Institute, a film school located in Troy, Michigan. If you'd like to know more about our extensive one-year filmmaking program, please check out the website at motionpicture.edu and schedule a tour today.